Well, good morning again. Welcome to our Advent series. If you have a device that connects to Facebook, would you go on to Facebook, just like, share, check in, and maybe tag somebody else. Let them know what's going on and the reason that they can have peace in their lives by sharing that with them. Well, you know how we all have moments that we prepare for, and then we all have moments we just can't prepare for, right? So yesterday we came to prepare some stuff. I don't know if you noticed, we moved the speakers. We've been trying to readjust how the sound flows in this room. But as we got here, it's also the time where we welcome our homeless friends in the community. And so I went downstairs just to say hello to some of them. And one of them looked at me and said, "Are you the pastor here?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Hold on a sec, I need to talk to you." And so I'm going, okay, all right. You know, I've had this conversation many times. A lot of my conversations start, "Are you a pastor? I need to talk to you." So I'm ready for this, right? And he pulls out his phone. He goes, "I use DoorDash, and I can't get my account to set the GPS. Can you just fix this for me?" I didn't know Jesus gave that spiritual ability, the ability to fix DoorDash. But hey, I'm here for all of your technological needs. And then, if I don't know how to fix it, I know who to send you to. So it works out. There are things we can't prepare for. But then at Christmas, there's also an entire season that we prepare for, isn't it? When I was a kid, I don't remember decorating, probably because just like my kids, if I helped decorate, everything ended up in one spot and it didn't look very good. But I remember being at my grandmother's house. We lived with her for several years, and sometime around like 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas, cooking began. And it always started with sugary treats that we weren't allowed to touch until Christmas. It was torture. It always started with this fudge. She always made fudge first. And then it would go out in the garage. And then there'd be hardtack. I don't know if you've ever had hardtack. It's like sugar that's been turned into a rock. But they would always put this confectioner sugar on top. Because what goes best with sugar but more sugar? Yes. And if you ate it just right and breathed out on accident, you would blow this cloud of smoke like a dragon. It was phenomenal. Now, this isn't my grandparents' house, but this picture kind of represented well what we did. This was at Columbus. We had a family who would host 50 or 60 people, and they would just pour sweets everywhere. And in my grandmother's house, there was always tan and brown Tupperware containers from the 1970s, and there were snickerdoodles, and there were pinwheels, and there was chocolate this, and there was sugary that. That was how I knew Christmas was coming. And the fact that I wasn't allowed to touch any of it, well, that just made the anticipation even greater. But then sometime around the week of Christmas, we shifted from sugary treats to mashed potatoes. Like 4 or 5 different flavors and kinds. One was, whipped, and one of them was called sinful potatoes. That's how you know they're good, right? They're called sinful right in the name. And then there would be stuffings and turkeys, and at some point my grandfather inevitably every year would use these words. He'd say, "Dolly, you cooked enough for an army." And he was kind of right. I mean, we had 20 people or so there for Christmas, and if you took just one plate, you were the black sheep. Like, how dare you eat so little on Christmas? You'd have 2 or 3 plates, and then we would come back for the next 3 or 4 days to keep eating all that was made. Just in your mind for a second, go back to Grandma's house and just smell the Christmas cookies, the wassail, the whatever it is you make that just brought about that feeling that, oh my goodness, Christmas is here. That preparation led to a pretty powerful day. And as we go through this series, we're going to be talking today, as we speak about Christmas, about the preparation of Christmas. You see, as we go through, we're going each of the gospel messages kind of consecutively. And so last week we talked about Matthew and the history of Christmas. Today we're going to talk about Mark and the preparation of Christmas. So turn in your Bibles, if you will, to Mark chapter 1, verse 1. If you don't have a Bible, there's some in the pew in front of you. You're welcome to take that home, read it devotionally. We also have some Advent devotions that are out in the lobby. If you haven't started those, there's still plenty of time. But Mark 1, chapter 1 starts like this: the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Now, I'm going to segue for just a second here to show you something, because this is already a very powerful sentence. If you remember last week, we talked about the history of Christmas and how that first sentence that Matthew gives is just loaded. It's pregnant with meaning. And here we see the beginning of the gospel of Jesus the Christ. Remember, it wasn't Mary Christ and Joseph Christ who had Jesus Christ. This was the Christ, the Messiah, the one that Israel had been waiting for thousands of years. And Mark adds this: the Son of God. But then he begins to tell us about the preparation, to remind us, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, "See, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you. He will prepare the way." Go on to the next slide. A voice of one crying out in the wilderness. And what's he saying again? Prepare the way for the Lord. Make his paths straight. And then he kind of segues for a moment to talk about John the Baptist. He says, John came baptizing in the wilderness and proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. So let's look at this beginning of the gospel. This phrase right here, gospel, is one that gets misused a lot in today's world. In the Greek, it was the euangelion. It was the kingly pronouncement. Oftentimes a king would make an announcement, and that would be the message that would go out to all. But here we have a king who is Jesus the Christ. And then we see added in the Son of God. Do you know what's missing from this story? Like everything from the Christmas story, right? All of the stuff that you sit down and tell your kids, you don't find it in Mark. In fact, as author Eugene Peterson says in his introduction to the book of Mark, in the Message translation, he said, Mark wastes little time. He just gets right down to business. There's one sentence introduction, not a digression to be found from beginning to end. He just wants you to know an event has taken place that radically changes the way we look at and experience the world. And Mark just can't wait to tell us about it. There's this breathless anticipation, this excitement off every sentence. The sooner we get to the heart of the message, the better. God is here, and he is on our side. God is here, and he's on our side. In fact, that's our key thought for this morning. So if you're taking notes, if you remember nothing else, I want it to be this. In fact, if you remember nothing else for the rest of your life, let it be this: God is here, and he is on our side. What do you do to prepare for Christmas? For the Jewish families, for thousands of years, they prepared anxiously. They waited for this Messiah. They dreamt of this coming king, many of them feeling that he would rule the world and take over, and the Jews would be the richest, the most prosperous nation. But then they went through this season of about 400 years where God didn't speak from heaven. There was no revelation, and it was almost like, did God abandon us? But Mark starts out with a reminder right off the bat. God hasn't abandoned us. He's here. And not only is he here, he's for us. He's not disinterested. He's not angry at us. He's not ready to throw a lightning bolt at us. He is here for us. You know, the closer and closer we get to Christmas, it seems like the less time we have for any news, let alone good news. We're running about back and forth. We're going to the stores. We're just doing so many things. If I had asked my grandmother in those days, hey, do you feel ready for Christmas? You know what she would say? there's a dozen more of this to bake, and there's 100 more of these, and your aunt might become, I don't know, maybe your estranged uncle 3 times removed might randomly show up, and if the Queen of England does, because I don't know why grandmas are always concerned about the Queen of England showing up, but we've got the dishes in the cabinet back over here, right? But that wasn't the way I prepared for Christmas at all. As a kid, I just got to soak all that in, get fat, eat the candy, and get presents. It was great. But then there came a phase in my life where, I wasn't quite the dad that I am now, and I was kind of in that in-between. And you know what I figured out? If you work a lot of long hours during the Black Friday to Christmas season, things go well for your pocketbook. I was a salesman at Sears, and what I figured out was Black Friday to, about 2-3 weeks after that, depending, if you showed up at 5 in the morning and you didn't leave till about 11 o'clock at night, your paychecks would be about 10 times the size that they normally were. And so that was my Christmas preparation. I would work nonstop selling other people big screen TVs and washers and dryers. And if I had like that little attack of conscience, like, is this really what this season is all about? Well, I just bought people nice things, and then it was okay, right? One year I bought my mom a washer and dryer, and I'll never forget taking that washer and dryer and setting it beside the tree because those boxes were bigger than the tree, and then just waiting for her to come home that day. She walked in and she went, "What are you doing?" As if like my friends were gonna jump out of there and attack her with airsoft guns, because that's never happened before, come on. But I just remember sitting there going, "Oh, you'll see." But for me, it was all about the boxes. It was all about the lights. The preparation was how much money could I put in my pocketbook because everybody else is spending money on Christmas. No wonder when I got to Christmas, when I didn't get the thing I wanted or it came in the wrong color, I was like, "You've ruined Christmas. How dare you?" I wasn't preparing my heart for the coming of a king. I was preparing just to get more and more stuff. But this season right now, this Advent, as we light the candles of hope and peace, and as we move through love, we get to this center candle, which is the Christ. The reminder that it's not about presents, it's about presence. And Mark brings that to the forefront for us. His message is God is here and he is on our side. On the surface, Mark's gospel seems to just breeze right through the gospel story. Seems to breeze right through the Christmas story, that is, because he wants to get to what is at the heart of the gospel. And so if you go to Mark chapter 1 and you're already only in verse 9, go ahead and turn there if you will. You see that he's already 30 years in, right? Jesus is an adult. He's getting baptized. But I want you to see how consistent his message stays. It says in verse 9, "In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee. He was baptized in the Jordan by John, the one who prepared the way. And as soon as he came up out of the water, he saw the heavens being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And then a voice came from heaven. 'This is my son, my beloved son. In you I am well pleased.'" I don't know that I've ever told that as part of the Christmas story before. And yet Mark is only 9 verses, maybe like 6 or 7 sentences tops into his gospel. And he's already bringing us to this point. Why? Because he wants us to see the culmination of this preparation. You see, if you turn back to Malachi, it'll be on screen, or you can find it in your Bibles. It's the last book of the Old Testament. The last time, at least in the order we have our scriptures in now, that you see God speak to humanity. And what does he say? "Look, I am going to send you the prophet Elijah before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers." And then, for something like 400 years, silence from heaven. And then we go back to Mark, and he's opening up his gospel. He's talking about this preparation, and then what does he say? The first time God speaks from heaven, not through an angel, not through a prophet, not through a messenger, in 400 some odd years. This is my son. God doesn't want us to miss this. We don't lean into our Jewish heritage sometimes as much as we could. But this is a part of that history that we inherited when we follow Jesus, because our ancestors had a promise of a king, not who would rule from a throne and say, bow down to me, but who would turn the hearts of children to their parents, parents back to their children. And then the first time God speaks from heaven, breaking his silence, this is my son. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children. He will turn the hearts of children to their fathers. See, when we say that the message of Christmas, especially the Gospel of Mark and his presentation of Christmas, is that God is here and he is on our side, sometimes we just take that to mean, cool, God's in the room. There's this creepy vibe. I felt the hairs on my arm raise up. That must have been God. Couldn't have been air conditioning, right? But there's something about this season. There's something about this reminder. It shouldn't just be kept to December, whatever day you decorate your tree. For some, that's like before Halloween, because that's when they go on sale now. Until, whenever you take it down in January. There was a year where my mom and I didn't take down the tree. We just kept decorating it for different holidays. So suddenly it became a Valentine's tree. But whenever you take down your tree, that shouldn't be the only time you feel and experience God. He's here. He's on our side. He wants to bring that peace. And he wants to start right within our own lives, reconciling families, turning our hearts to each other. Because I don't know if you've seen, this might be news to you, but if you turn on the news in 2018, it was almost like you were doing this as you were getting ready to watch it. Peace on earth. It's the farthest thing from what we hear most days. So let it be us who realizes peace on earth doesn't come through the absence of war. It doesn't come from the gifts that we receive. It comes only through the presence of God. If you weren't here last week, I'd encourage you to go onto our Facebook page or go onto our website. Watch last week's sermon as we talked about the history of Christmas. Because Matthew as well gives us this voice that God is for us. In fact, the last words that Jesus spoke from his earthly human mouth, I am with you, even to the end of the age. Some translations put it, even to the end of the world. Like, I kind of like that, because some days it feels like the end of the world. And for some of us, Christmas isn't the holly and jolly. It's a time where we're reminded what we've missed, or what we've missed out on, or who we've missed. There's a reason why seasonal depression is such a thing. As you get closer to the holidays, there's almost this pressure, isn't there? Like, if you don't have the most perfect Christmas, you have failed as a human being. It's okay to let that tension out, because we all feel it. But the reminder of Christmas is a God who is with us, who is here, and who's on our side. We've mentioned it a couple times, but we're going to be doing the angel tree for some kids at Colfax Elementary again this year. That little tree that's right out here, just straight as you go through those doors, has a little ornament and it has names on it. The reason I love us doing this is because last year I got to meet some of these kids. I got to see the smile on their faces. Because while we are worried about having our perfect Christmas or getting the perfect gift in the perfect color, some of these kids aren't going to be getting gifts at all. In fact, as we read through those cards last year, I started to realize that there are some of these families who don't have the gift of a heated house. Now, they have a house, just no money to heat it with. Many of them, if the school didn't provide them with some food to take home, wouldn't eat the entirety of Christmas break. Not being at school means not having food. This Christmas, we get another chance to remind ourselves that God is here and be that love in action. And so I would encourage you, we've got 15 ornaments on the tree. They've already told us, hey, if this just goes well and you can get some more people, we have some more we would love to give. By doing that, not only are you bringing that presence of Christ, and yes, this time it might even be through presents, but you're also partnering to show a little kid what it means to have that Christmas at Grandma's house that we all remembered. As I said, just smell that apple pie, smell that food cooking. This year, whatever we give, we're also going to be partnering with the food bank. And so they're going to be giving them food to take home so that they don't have to worry about not having a meal over Christmas vacation. And there's also a group who's doing a coat drive. So every single kid will be getting a warm winter coat. That is just one way that you can bring God's presence into this season. But again, while I encourage you to take action on that, it kind of starts right here inside of us. That reminder that God is here. That feeling that, as Kelly said last week, quoting the Grinch, Christmas can't be bought in a store. It's that peace, that goodness that comes not from within ourselves, but from within a baby who invaded the world and changed it forever. Sometimes I wish our Christmases could be more like Mark's gospel. Let's just get right to the point. Let's just get right to the main attraction, because when Jesus shows up, everything changes. This morning as we respond, not only will we continue to open our altars for prayer, if you want to come up and have an elder pray with you, or if you or one of the elders, some of the elders would like to come up and pray for the church, we would invite that time. But we're also going to be taking communion together. I think it's interesting that communion means common union. It means coming together. And Jesus didn't just come together with his disciples at that last meal. He also invited us to come together with him. And so as we sing, as we spend some time in reflection, the ushers are going to come forward in a moment. They're going to hand out the elements for communion. I would ask that you hold that, and we will all share in them in just a moment together. If you're a guest with us and you're not sure if you're allowed to participate, I just want you to know that God is here for you. There's no rules, there's no regulations. We just ask that you would consider your relationship with Jesus as you hold that cup, as you reflect on the Christmas season, and as you realize, maybe encounter for the first time in a while, a God who is here and who is with you. I'll come back up in a moment, pray, and we'll take the elements together. But would you enter into some reflective worship?